Hello, I'm Jason, one of the co-founders of Etrify, and we're a carbon footprinting social enterprise for sustainability-focused small businesses. Over the course of the next few days, I'm going to be taking you through a really short 3-part course which introduces you to net zero, the need and the benefits, explains the GHG protocol and scopes 1, 2 and 3 emissions, and provides you with an easily digestible 10-step net zero action list. The course is paired with our net zero canvas. At the end of each section, I'll be providing you with some questions to get you thinking and will invite you to note your thoughts and answers down onto the canvas. My favourite tool to do this is using Miro, where you can simply copy and paste the canvas onto a Miro board and add sticky notes like this. And if you don't use Miro, then you can draw the canvas on a piece of paper, or if you prefer not to use the canvas at all, simply write the answers down in a notebook, Google or Word document. At the end, we'll end up with a completed canvas or set of answers, which gives us an overview of where your business currently is on its net zero journey. In just 20 minutes, you'll leave this short course feeling empowered to act, have a deeper understanding on the topic of net zero, and have a list of actions that you can get started on straight away. Before getting started, I thought I'd introduce myself so you can get to know me a bit better. As mentioned, I'm Jason, one of the co-founders of Etrify, and my background is actually very technical. I did a 4 years Masters in Physics and then moved into a career in data. After a couple of years, I really felt that I wanted to use my tech skills as a force for good, and climate crisis is always something that I'd felt very passionate about, so putting 2 and 2 together is really what got me into this. The first version of Etrify was actually building an app to help consumers calculate their carbon footprints. Long story short, we spent a year coding an app that no one used, we spent 6 months trying to fundraise and raise nothing, and eventually pivoted to B2B. Since then, I've worked as a product manager for 6 months and now cover all things product and marketing for Etrify, as well as some of the carbon footprint calculations. We've actually been working on carbon footprinting for about 2 years now, and we largely see it as a data problem above all else. You've got the emissions usage data from the companies and the emission factors from the government and other sources, and all it really is finding a way to combine and manage the two to get a total carbon footprint number. And data is our expertise. We're physicists by nature who like to calculate things, so carbon footprinting really seemed like the best way for us to put our skills to use and help contribute to tackling the climate crisis. So let's get into the workshop. In part 1, we'll be covering the basics of net zero, including a simple definition, the difference between carbon neutral and net zero, why net zero is important and why we should care, as well as the benefits of net zero. So firstly, what is net zero? Net zero is simply the balance between greenhouse gases produced and the amount that's removed from the atmosphere. We like to explain it a bit like a bath, where turning on the taps adds water and pulling the plug removes water. If we add water faster than it leaves the plug, the bath will overflow. The same applies to net zero, where in order to achieve net zero, we're not adding more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than we can remove. So what's the difference between carbon neutral and net zero, and how does this apply to your business? Carbon neutral refers to a policy of not increasing carbon emissions and achieving reduction through offsets. PAS 2060 is the international carbon neutral standard, and in order to be carbon neutral, Scope 3 is encouraged but not required. Net zero means making changes to reduce carbon emissions to the lowest amount possible and offsetting as a last resort. Scope 3 must be included to achieve net zero. For businesses, what this means is identifying where your emissions lie and coming up with a strategy to reduce those as much as possible. So why should we care about net zero? This slide I've tried to summarise the latest climate science. Obviously, we all know that the excess of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is triggering harmful global warming, already affecting millions across the globe. Global emissions during the decade of 2010 to 2019 were the highest recorded in human history, and any additional emissions that are released will increase this concentration. And I think this is a really important point to remember, and sometimes I often forget myself that we can adopt all of these sustainable practices and reduce our emissions as much as we can and offset as much as we like, but at the end of the day, if we're still emitting, and that concentration is going to go up. Now, in order to prevent a 1.5 degree warming, as agreed in the Paris Agreement, greenhouse gas levels or concentrations in the atmosphere must not exceed 465 parts per million, with a range of 445 to 485. We're actually dangerously close to reaching this limit. If you look on the bottom left of this slide here, you can see that as of 2019, the concentrations were at 460 parts per million. So we're very, very close to hitting that limit of 465. So I've got a couple of data sources here on the right hand side, which I'll share with you in an email as part of this course. And the bottom one here is kind of a summary of the latest climate science. It's a summary of the IPCC's Sixth Assessment Report. The IPCC are the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they're basically the UN body that's responsible for climate science. So you can just think of this report as a summary of the latest climate science this year. It's quite in-depth, so I won't go through all the stats, but the ones which stood out to me I've summarised here, where in order to keep 1.5 alive, or to not reach that limit, or for our bath to not overflow, global emissions must peak at the latest before 2025, halve below 2019 levels by 2030, and be net zero by early 2050s. And it's also important to remember that current climate pledges to 2030 from governments and organisations across the world aren't projected to achieve this. So I really just wanted to highlight the level of urgency in solving this global issue. However, it's important to remember that it's not all doom and gloom. There's still time to solve it, and that's why we're here. We have all the technology available to reach net zero, and quote the IPCC, we have viable options in all sectors to at least halve emissions by 2030. There's also numerous benefits to your business for acting on net zero today. Aside from it being the right thing to do, we've come up with this kind of 6-point action plan on benefits for acting on net zero for your business. The first is cost, so you can increase your operational efficiency, reduce consumption and save money. The second is brand, so stand out from your competitors and win customers. Thirdly, customers. There's actually an increasing customer demand for sustainability now, and this is only going to increase over the next decade. Fourth, employees. So employees are starting to choose companies who care about climate change and are taking a stance on sustainability. Government contracts. So it's actually a requirement to have a net zero strategy if you're applying for government contracts now, and this is called PPN 0621. And finally, stakeholders. You're doing something good for the world. Who wouldn't love it? So now I'd like to invite you to take a look at and have a think about these questions and just kind of take a moment to reflect on what we've just been through. Where do you currently stand on climate change, and how does that make you feel? Do you understand the latest climate science? What are your thoughts? Are you talking about climate change with friends, family, and your professional network? What actions towards net zero is your business currently taking? Are you happy with the level of action that your business is taking, and would you like to do more? And do you know how to do more? To finish, let's take a look at our net zero canvas. All you need to do now is note down your answers to these questions in the top left section of the canvas, and I'll see you in part 2.